This is the 100 Club. I'm Tom, and this is the home of short format cricket on YouTube and on your favourite podcast provider. I'm joined once again by Rich to talk about the year of cricket 2022. Rich, how's it going?
Very well. Happy New Year, Tom.
Happy New Year.
And what a year we have in front of us in the world of cricket. Another busy one.
Extremely busy. Clearly, we're nearly at the 2-year anniversary of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think mostly we've adjusted to how we expect to consume cricket now, but the pace of it hasn't slowed down. So there's a huge amount going on over the next 12 months. And I think we're going to pick out some dates, right?
That's right. We're going to look at the first 3 months of the year in detail and then have a bit of a wider look at what's coming April through to December in this video.
Yeah. You don't have to follow along with your diary at home. I'm going to put it on screen, but also we're not going to include everything. It's just going to be some highlights, I think. So let's start off then, straight in. And as you can see, Rich, I've been to PowerPoint University this week.
Lovely.
So we can have a look at exactly what lined up in January. What we're not going to talk about, though, is obviously the Ashes ongoing at the minute because there's no short format cricket in there. You happy with that?
Yeah. More than happy not to discuss the Ashes at the minute.
But there is other cricket going on in the Southern Hemisphere. Most notably, I think, at the moment, the BBL, the Big Bash League for men. That final there on the 28th of January. Have you been enjoying it so far?
Yeah, it's been a good tournament. Sydney Sixers obviously leading the way, but there's still all to play for because the top 5 all qualify for the kind of convoluted eliminator series. 5 out of 8. So I think everybody's still just about in it. Obviously, the Strikers and the Renegades only have a win each at this point. But even then, I think they're still just about within touching with distance. It's been nice to see a couple of Englishmen making runs in Australia for once, albeit in T20. Sam Billings sits at number 6, I think, in the run scoring charts at the minute on 254 for the Thunder.
Yeah, he's doing nicely. I mean, there's been patchy performances from others. I think the bowlers on the English side have impressed me as well. Sak Mahmood doing very well. Some good stuff there. But, I mean, good quality. I'm looking forward to seeing some more of the Perth Scorchers. I think they've been really exciting to watch. And actually, they've all had their moments, those teams. And I think there've been some really interesting games. Some slightly disappointing crowds, though, but perhaps that's understandable at the minute.
Yeah, and just to tie in with the... we have the start of the Pakistan Super League here on the 27th of January. The performance by Mohammad Hosnain today.
Yeah.
3 wickets in an over, bowling absolutely rapid. Bodes well for that tournament in terms of excitement levels as well. So that'll be starting towards the end of the month. And be interesting to see if the Multan Sultans can repeat their victory from last year. Islamabad will be looking to go one better. Obviously, they won the group stage last year, but sort of fell in the eliminator to Peshawar. So that'll be an interesting one to pick up as the BBL finishes, so the PSL starts.
Exactly, and actually, it's a busy weekend all round because what I haven't noted on there is on the 29th, the Super Smash in New Zealand concludes both the men's and women's tournaments. So just block the weekend off, Rich, before the Australia-New Zealand ODI on the 30th. Sorted.
There's a couple of, before that happens, there's a couple of interesting international series involving both South Africa men and South Africa women. Yeah. The women take on the West Indies in 3 T20s and 5 one-dayers. South Africa got the better of them in September, winning that series 4-1. But and West Indies really struggled with the bat. I don't think they got over 200 in any of the five games. Yeah. But they didn't have Stefani Taylor for that series, and she's incredibly important to that side. So I think that's going to be a really crucial warm-up to the Women's World Cup that we'll talk about in a minute. But then in terms of the men's side, obviously South Africa and India playing tests at the minute, but they'll go into a 3 one-dayers, and that's going to be, well, we thought it was going to be the start of the Rohit Sharma era, but he's not. He's injured. He's out. So it's going to be KL Rahul will captain the side, and a couple of interesting additions to the squad. Venkatesh Iyer has been brought in, and Ruturaj Gaikwad, who we've talked before. He's been in the squad before, but he's yet to make his debut. I can see if Rohit Sharma's out, he's the natural replacement to come in and play that. And I think sort of that could be the start of a very long and illustrious international career for Ruturaj Gaikwad. So I'll be interested to see that one. On the South African side, obviously, we've had the news that Quentin de Kock retired from Test cricket. How will that impact the one-day side and his role in it? Obviously, South Africa are in a big transition phase at the minute in terms of their white ball cricket.
They are, and I'd be interested to say, I'd see if they might bring Faf du Plessis back in actually onto that one, because he clearly wasn't retained in the IPL. So he's up for the big mega auction that's coming up. So might be wanting to sell his wares slightly.
Yeah, and just as Ravi Ashwin got it back into the T20 side, he's back in the ODI squad as well for the first time since 2017. So it just goes to show that older players, you think that their time is done, but they show the form in franchise cricket and they can get back into the international scene. So why not bring Faf back? He's certainly deserved it with his performances in the last few months.
Yeah, and Ravi Ashwin also not retained as well. Maybe there's an argument there as well.
Yes.
Could be a good one. The last one we've got on there to 22nd is the West Indies-England series of T20Is over in West Indies. Interesting squad announcements for that. That's very much a sort of not a second string set of T20, but perhaps the depth squad, if that's not unfair. Lots to those players to prove as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously red ball cricket is a problem for England at the minute, but white ball cricket is going great guns. England are still ranked number 1 T20 at the minute, as far as I'm aware. That might have changed now post the World Cup T20, but going into that tournament, they were ranked number 1. They're top of the ODI league table that runs from 2020 to 2023. And they showed last year when they played Pakistan with what was essentially a third 11, that there's in tremendous strength and depth. So I'll be interested to see how some of those guys who are kind of knocking on the door will go in West Indies. So, and obviously West Indies are strong at home, so it should be a good series.
Just want to note though, they are taking, I think, 8 BBL players over to the West Indies for that. So if you're following some of the English players in the BBL, watch out, because your teams are going to change shape quite significantly for that series.
Yeah, and this is this constant challenge, isn't it, between scheduling franchise cricket and scheduling international cricket, because obviously some of those players are huge parts of that team. We talked about like Sam Billings and Zach Mahmood, Ben Duckett at the Heat,
James
Vince and Hales. Well, Hales not been having as good a season this year, but and I think has been missing. Rumours are he's got COVID at the minute, so that's why he's missing the last couple of games. But it does change the complexion of a tournament, doesn't it, when sort of the major players who have been part of the group stage disappear for the eliminators. So I think something to keep an eye on as we go forward.
We've only got to the end of January, though, Rich. We've got plenty more to look forward to in 2022.
Yeah,
let's get into February.
Let's do it.
So what have we got in there? Well, big one to start off with, really, which is the Women's Ashes starting on the 4th. Again, the multi-format tournament. I think that works well. I like it. Mix of Test, T20, ODI. What can we expect a better series from England's women, or are they going to come up against the juggernaut of Australia women?
So, based on the last few series, you'd say it's going to be very difficult for them because England don't have a particularly good record in the last couple of Ashes. In fact, they've been kind of quite comprehensively beaten. I mean, if we just and there's been a limited amount of international cricket in women's international cricket in the last couple of years, particularly involving Australia. So it's hard to sort of have a barometer. I suppose the closest we could say is that England had a very good series against India, in which England looked sort of slightly the better side, won that series, or admittedly in home conditions. Yeah. And India then went and played Australia very close in that series at the back end of last year. So based on that, you'd say, okay, well, it could be competitive. And actually, I really like the look of the England squad. I think they have strengthened in places. I think Sophia Dunkley has just looked a natural at the international level. Last summer, just slotted into that team very well. I think she's sort of like one of the first names on the team sheet now. With a few other people have impressed throughout. Maya Boucher's in that 17-person squad, and Charlie Jean has made it in as well. She had a very good summer, came into that New Zealand series, did well, and I think she could be a sort of useful addition to the squad as well. So, as well as that 17-woman squad playing the Ashes, you've then got a strong whatever they call England Lionesses team as well. With quite a few encouraging youngsters in there, the likes of Alice Capsey, Lauren Bell, Emily Arlett, etc. So it'd be interesting to see how they go as that series goes in parallel. Yeah,
I'd like to see some big crowds for that one as well. I think that's promises to be an exciting tour for me to watch. So I really hope that does survive some of the issues that clearly go on around crowds and attendances at the moment, and see how that gets on. Some other big stuff going on there later in the month, actually, in the IPL, of course. We haven't done a lot on the retentions and what's coming up with that, but the mega auction on the 12th promises to be quite the event. Rich, who's top of your shopping list if you're a franchise in the IPL at the minute?
I think it's going to be interesting to see what the the new franchises, Ahmedabad and Lucknow do, so they can obviously have first dibs of non-retained players. I think the likes of KL Rahul will be highly sought after, as you say. Ashwin himself, perhaps
Rashid Khan.
Rashid Khan was surprisingly not retained. Ben Stokes, if he makes himself available.
Liam Livingston.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
I was excited to see that Sunrisers Hyderabad have appointed Brian Lara as a strategic advisor, Tom. one for guys of our generation.
Honestly, one of my favourites, but not necessarily who I'd ask. I don't know. Maybe that's unfair, but not always pre-T20 for a start.
Well, I think we'll do that as a video at some point. Is our T20 team from the pre-T20 era? Who would have excelled at it? In the midst of all that, the West Indies will be touring. They're playing 3 ODIs and 3 T20s, so not the worst time as a West Indian player to get yourself in front of the Indian selectors or the franchise selectors. Although obviously, I mean, they're such sophisticated operations now. They're tracking players all over the world, so it's not necessarily the case that they're going to discover somebody because they're playing in their backyard. But still, I think
conditions though.
Exactly, a good opportunity to put your hand up. So I think that'll be an interesting series to watch as the in the backdrop to the mega auction.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Clearly, just the dates on the screen there represent the start of series, for instance. So just if you're following along like that, but the mega auction itself on the 12th, and I think we'll put something out around that. And the PSL final then on the 27th. So that's going to bring us on into March. And it doesn't really let up much in March. Actually, it's big business. So March we've got there. Perhaps the World Cup dominating that schedule. I think that's about a 3-week turnaround for that one, starting on the 4th. We'll have learned quite a lot about those international teams though, as the women's international schedule ramps up again over the next couple of months. Have you got any early feelings beyond Australia?
So it's a forgiving format for the bigger teams. So the 8 teams have qualified. It's England, South Africa, New Zealand, the West Indies, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, and one other. Help me out here, Tom. South Africa. Did I already say South Africa?
Oh, I blanked out already.
It's sort of the big 8 minus Sri Lanka, I suppose, would be the way you describe it. And I think for England, India, Australia, they would have a pretty strong chance of getting themselves into that semi-final. The question is, who's that 4th spot go to? Is it New Zealand? Is it South Africa? Is it West Indies? The 8 teams, they'll all play each other once in a group format and then have a semi-final. So I think we're going to see some good quality cricket. The run rate in women's ODIs in New Zealand over the last decade is 4.7. That's second only to Australia. So we might expect to see some decent scores out there.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be a case of teams feeling themselves out a little bit, room for experimentation, and the big teams getting themselves right for the latter stages rather than too much jeopardy early on. But intrigued to see the likes of Pakistan and Bangladesh women, teams that we don't see an awful lot of, Tom. So interesting to see how they go.
Yeah, it'll be a good one. Clearly at the wrong time of the day for us again to follow it very closely, but we'll do our very best, of course, here on the 100 Club. The last one I want to pick out there from March, actually, is the Pakistan hosting Australia series over in Lahore. I think they've got a few ODIs, 3 ODIs and 1 T20, is it, running into April. That should be good to see some cricket again in Pakistan.
I think they've got some tests as well as part of that tour. So
okay,
always that question, isn't it? Will they actually go? We've had so few false dawns in terms of the major teams touring Pakistan, notably last October when New Zealand and England both pulled out at the last minute. So fingers crossed, the Australians do make that trip. I think as we were about to sort of start thinking about the latter part of the year, the men's short form cricket is really looking towards the fact we have another T20 World Cup only a year after the previous one.
Whoa. Hold on. Let's do the rest of the year
Let's do the rest of the year.
Before you steal all my sandwiches. Because the one that's straight off the back of March is, of course, the IPL, which is kicking off on the 2nd of April. And remarkably, somehow, in this crowded cricket calendar, the rest of the calendar largely empties across April and most of May to allow for that. But it does mean that really has to be perhaps the highlight of franchise short format cricket again in 2022. A return to crowds, hopefully.
There's a few, as you say, there's a few really intriguing points about the IPL this year. We've already talked about the mega auction. A lot of players are going to be moving around. So some very new look teams, new look playing 11s. Then we actually have some new teams. Lucknow and Ahmedabad, the new franchises that were. So it's going to be a 10-team tournament, which I think sort of could change the dynamic of it a little bit as well. So I'm intrigued to see that. And of course, the third thing, back in India, back with crowds, which really, we both commented, as much as we enjoyed the cricket in the UAE, playing it in those sort of largely empty stadiums, it just wasn't quite the same as playing it in front of sort of 80,000 at Eden Gardens going nuts.
Fingers crossed for that. Clearly, we know what the IPL will provide. We know something of what the India-South Africa series will provide in June. That looks to be good. Then on the England side, then they've actually hosting India in England for 3 T20s, 3 ODIs, I think, for the men's team. But between those two events, I think England are going to head over to Amsterdam for a few ODIs against the Dutch team as well, which will be something new for us. I don't think we've seen too much of that. So something different, perhaps maybe, again, not the first stringers playing in that. And then a bit of rejigging of the domestic short format game as well over here in England, with the Blast now having been pulled forward slightly in the year. So last year and previously, you've seen the Blast finals in September. We know it's going to be, though, this year, 16th of July. So the whole Blast tournament will take place before the 100 kicks in, then somewhere around 2nd, 3rd August, somewhere in that region, yet to be announced. So I think that's a good touch. We like the Blast being sort of not preliminary, that's the wrong word, but a discrete event then before the 100 comes in, when we've got a lot of the international stars around as well. Would you agree with my logic there, Rich?
Absolutely. And I think the Australians have shown that you can do an international summit at the same time as your sort of T20 tournaments happening with the Big Bash. I think it didn't make sense last year in having the group stages and then having the sort of quarterfinals and finals day post the 100. There was that huge gap. I know as fans of teams that made the final last year, Kent and Somerset won their quarterfinals 2 or 3 days before finals day. There was almost no chance to sort of schedule a trip to it. So I think for fans of the teams who would make the finals day, more of them will be able to make it. I think it'd be a more coherent tournament having it in that condensed space. And I think it really makes a lot of sense. I think the other advantage is players who do particularly well in the T20 tournament then put themselves in the shop window for the 100 that comes the next month.
So I'll give you a little detail. I don't know if you've caught it as well on what the 100 draft looks like this year. So believe it or not, the retention window is currently open for the 100. That's both the men's and women's tournaments. The women can retain anyone up to a couple of England centrally contracted, and then their own team. So we should see rather, I'd expect, a good degree of continuity in the women's teams that we saw last year. Once that retention window closes, then it'll be open market again for players to be bought and traded, not a draft process for the women. For the men, that retention window allows for up to 10 to be retained in each team. So again, a good amount of continuity. That's overseas and domestic players we could expect, up to maximum of 2 of the centrally contacted England internationals. And then a full squad of 15 required. So the draft will take place somewhere late March, we're expecting. And then they have to leave one of the £30,000 slots open for the Vitality wildcard player. Pick. Okay. So coming back to what you were saying there, the Vitality Blast being finished, discrete on the 16th of July, allows that Blast player to actually shine, get the Blast pick into the 100 there in August. Does that make all sense?
It does. That's very clear, Tom. Let me just touch on another tournament that might be new to some people that's being played from the 29th of July.
Yeah.
And that is cricket coming back to the Commonwealth Games for the first time since 1998. Now, obviously, that was played
I don't remember the 1998 Commonwealth Games. Do you, Rich?
I do, because it's the one time where the Caribbean islands compete as islands against other teams, or in my memory, that was one of the times. So seeing Brian Lara playing for Trinidad against other teams. I can't remember if he actually played in the Commonwealth or not, but it was something sort of strange about seeing that. And this will just be a women's tournament only. So 8 teams are qualified. Barbados will be representing the West Indies. Otherwise, it's sort of the usual suspects. Australia, India, and Pakistan, they're in Group 1 with Barbados. New Zealand, South Africa, and England with a qualifier. Very neat tournament. It's going to be played over 8 days at Edgbaston. 2 groups of 4, semi-finals, final. My ideal cricket tournament, Tom. Short and sweet.
Absolutely.
But I wonder,
that's quite exciting, though. Yeah,
it is exciting. It is exciting. I do wonder if they're missing a trick slightly. It's the Commonwealth Games. The sport gives a chance to sort of showcase itself, get a few more nations involved, make it short and sweet, get some of the other teams. But no, it should be intriguing to see.
Yeah, and you wonder whether they might deconflict that from the start of the 100. I don't know. Maybe that's too much to ask.
I think it's okay because I think it's going to be over in 7 or 8 days. It's just going to be played straight through.
Maximum then a few days.
Indeed, and it means that hopefully, if people are playing for their nations in that, then they'll be around in the country already. So we won't have the situation we had last year, where a lot of players didn't want to travel to the UK for the 100, and teams had to sort of scramble to make up their rosters at the last minute. Maybe we'll be a lot more settled this year, which I think will benefit the tournament.
Yeah, so maybe there's a glimmer there of some sensible planning in the format. What we have got clearly is an England South Africa series that will run over with some test matches through the 100 window. That's fine. It's workable. We know it's going to happen every year, frankly, because that's prime test cricket in this country. And then we have perhaps the biggie at the end of the year, 16th of October. It's another men's T20 World Cup. I can't remember the last one, Rich. What happened? I blanked it.
So this one's going to be played in Australia, just in Australia, I think. I don't think it's being shared. I think they've announced the 7 cities, and you probably can guess which of the 7 cities are. And we already know 12 of the teams who have qualified. It's the 8 teams who finished in the top 8 last time in what was it, barely a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
Interesting, the teams that made it into the Super 12 phase, including Scotland, will, they'll, as well as Namibia, Sri Lanka, and West Indies, they automatically qualify for the tournament, but they'll need to play in the preliminary round.
Okay.
And they'll be joined by 4 more countries, of which I'll give you the full list. So it's Ireland, Netherlands, Oman, and Papua New Guinea. Nepal, the UAE, Singapore, and Zimbabwe have qualified for the global qualifier tournaments.
Okay.
They'll be joined by the regional winners, who are Uganda, USA, Canada as runners-up in North America, Bahrain, Hong Kong, Philippines, Jersey, and Guernsey. And they'll have 2 tournaments this year, one in Oman, one in Zimbabwe in July. And the top 4 from those 2 tournaments will make up the 16 for the T20 World Cup.
But we're looking at a similar format, with the preliminary rounds and then
exactly the same.
12. Okay.
Exactly the same as we just had.
Grand. Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that one when it comes. Okay, Rich, that's a bit of a blast through, quite a busy year. There is more cricket to be announced, though, I think it's fair to say. And as always, we should add the caveat of who knows what's going to happen, right?
Indeed. Well, fingers crossed. Obviously, pandemic's pending, but they've done a pretty good job of working out how the international calendar works in terms of getting teams in and out reasonably safely. The question is, in terms of the burnout of players, how much they want to spend time in bubbles. Will we see more rotation? Will we see more A and B squads being sent for different, tours? Potentially so. But fingers crossed. That just gives more people an opportunity to show what they can do.
Well, I agree with that. We'll have a bigger pool, hopefully, to choose from. Talking of burnout, I've had a tremendously, over-the-top Christmas and New Year period. I hope you have all had a fantastic period yourself. What I'm not burnt out from, though, is talking about short-format cricket. So if you want to do some more of this stuff, let's do it. Put some comments down below. If you'd like to see anything particular, we're happy to do it. I think we've got some good ideas coming up for the next few weeks, Rich.
We do indeed, yeah.
Okay, no trailer?
Well... I think the things to look forward to, obviously, we've got the Women's World Cup starting in March. We'll probably do a deep dive preview on that. We'll also start looking further ahead in terms of the 100 coming back next summer. And as you alluded to, we've got the retention, but also, it's clearly some of those teams need bolstering. Some of those teams need a fundamental redesign. So I think we'll be having a look at based on what we've seen since that tournament, who's doing well in world cricket, who's doing well in franchise leagues, who those teams should be bringing into their setups in order to do better come this summer.
Great stuff. All right, Rich. Well, it's been a blast. Thank you very much for joining. If you enjoyed that content, please let us know. Give us a like, hit the subscribe button. That'd be much appreciated. Here's to a great 2022. We'll see you there.
Cheers.